What's the gospel? Put it in a sentence. The gospel is the news that Jesus Christ, the righteous one, died for our sins, rose again, eternally triumphant over all his enemies, so that there is now no condemnation for those who believe, but only everlasting joy. That's the gospel.
Hello guys, and welcome back to the Post Podcast. As always, my name is Toya Akinoso. I'm your host. I am joined by Mike Omani. The Post Podcast is where we take post-raising questions sent in by our listeners about the Christian faith, and we try to the best of our ability to answer these questions and provide a source of encouragement to our listeners. Today's question is all about the Bible. It reads, how do you know if a Bible is trustworthy if there are so many translations? I'm sure if you've been a believer for a period of time, it's a question you've been asked by your friends who are atheists or friends who are of other faiths, and they'll often come with the question, well, if the Bible has been translated so many times in so many different languages over such a period of time, how can you trust that someone at some point in history didn't slip a few verses in there or take some stuff away? In short, how can you trust the Bible, which has been quote unquote changed so much over the years? So I'll throw that to you, Mike. How do you know if a Bible is trustworthy?
Well, good question. The truth of the matter is, it's hard to do this without kind of giving people a lot of information. But I suppose if you're clicking on this podcast, you're interested in knowing. So I'm going to take you at that. And when people say that, I've heard it all my life. The Bible's been translated so many times. So how do we know, that God, was in charge of that whole period, that whole, everything? How do we know people haven't used it? I mean, lots of other books have been corrupted. So why is the Bible any different? Well, people on the street and people in church even always say that thing. But it's because they don't really understand how Bible translations work. So a lot of their objections really are just assumptions they've made. I mean, the truth, just to lay some truth on the table, the Bible is the most popular book of all time, right? It is the best-selling book of all time. Trump even said once it's his favorite book, and only first to his book, the Art of the Deal. I just gave him promotion, but there you go. Now, the truth is there are lots and lots of English translations. The Bible is not only the best-selling book of all time, it's also the most translated book. It's the book that has garnered the most interest and intrigue since time began, really. And so there are lots of translations, but there are ways to check the efficacy or the accuracy of all these different copies. And in fact, the fact that there are so many translations actually strengthens our confidence in the Bible, that we accurately know what was said and how it was preserved over the years. The two ways we kind of do this is, one, we can see that ancient translations provided a lot of additional witnesses. So we still have access to a lot of the original manuscripts, which means we can cross-reference, right? But also having multiple independently translated translations allows us to be more certain about what the Bible accurately said. Let's address head-on, this objection people often have, that the Bible is like Chinese whispers. It's been passed on to so many different people, and so everyone's kind of changing and adding bits to it. Well, folks who say that are quite frankly a little misinformed. The way Chinese whispers works is quite simple. I whisper to you, Toye, something like, do you want some food? You whisper to your friend, do you want some food? She whispers to someone else, do you want some food? And typically, if you remember, at the end of the line, someone says, I want chicken. And you go, whoa, that's not what I said. Now, we think this is how the Bible was translated. One translation given to another, leading to some comical or some absurd end. Well, that's not how it works. The Bible wasn't translated Hebrew to Greek, Greek to Syriac, Syriac to Latin, Latin to German, German to English. That's not how it worked. Most of the time, the Bible's translated directly from its original manuscript. So when Jerome translated the Latin Vulgate in the 4th century, he translated the Old Testament from Hebrew and the New Testament from Greek. When Martin Luther in the 16th century did translations, It came straight from the original manuscript to the German translation. When Tyndale, who we all know popularized the Bible, he in his early English translations, he just took it from the manuscript straight to English. If you look at the King James Version as well, equally, the translators didn't go from one translation to the other. They went from the original manuscripts. Now, it is true that there are some English translations of other English translations, but that's typically, and very seldom is that popularly used. That's typically used for missionaries who may be in a obscure part of the world, and so they take an English translation, and from that English translation, they may translate it into the local language of that town or wherever it is they're in. That is very rare, and that is not normative practice. In fact, translations of translations is not normative practice whatsoever. So this notion that, it's passed through so many hands, it's just misinformed, because that's not how the Bible is translated. Very seldom do you get a translation of a translation. It's translated from its original manuscript, and the fact that there's so many gives us more confidence about the contents. Now, suppose we did have lots of translations. The reason why that two words are so important to us, and that word is sovereignty, and the second one is providence. We spoke about this in an earlier podcast. God is sovereign. If we really believe God is sovereign, then we have to trust that he's sovereign over the Bible. That means he's in complete control, right? And he has the power and the authority to oversee the process. But God doesn't just stop at his sovereignty. He then tells us about his providence. So not only is he sovereign, i.e. watching the whole process, God also speaks in Romans 8:28, as we've read before, Isaiah 42, about his providence, Job 42 rather, about his providence, which means his purposeful sovereignty. So he's also steering the process. Right? He's using all these different people, the diverse folk, all contributing to the Bible from different continents. He's using all their diverse experiences. He's using that to tell a compelling, unified story. Because remember, it's the Holy Spirit that writes the Bible, using men. Yeah. So, even if it was the case that I conceded and said, well, we have a lot of translations, well, God is sovereign over it. And it takes faith to believe that, but there you go. But again, let's say there are some typography issues, which some would maintain exist in the Bible. Commas are a place, right? Well, those commas or full stops, they say nothing, and they have no holding on the truth claims the Bible actually tries to make. It's very important you understand that the Bible, for the most part, isn't interested in literal truth claims. The Bible is packed with lots of different types of truths. We're talking allegorical truths, metaphoric truth, analogous truths, symbolic truths, synecdochical truths, melancholic truths. The Bible is packed with lots of different literary packages, all gearing at helping you understand who Jesus is, and all to the glory of God. So when folks say, the one reason they struggle to believe the Bible is the translations, that just can't be the case. Because the point Jesus makes, right, about the nature of man, the point that God makes about the separation between him, that has nothing to do with where the comma is or where one word is. The truth claims in the Bible are by far, in any literary text, the most protected and the most tightly preserved throughout the history of time. So if you say the Bible is not secure enough, then no text could ever be secure, and we can never know anything. That's what you have to maintain, and I suspect that's not what people mean. And at this stage, I want to speak to those who this may be a stumbling block for, to prayerfully say, well, God, help me to see this a bit differently, because I suppose they will never get to a position where they go, the Bible is historically intact, quote unquote, and for that reason, I now believe in Jesus. That's not how it works. Jesus' claims about who he is so simple that a man who's in a village somewhere who has no English education could understand it. And I think that's the point here. We shouldn't get lost in a theological hole that we forget the actual truth claims of the gospel. It's the truth. Whether you believe the comma is out of place or not, the truth claims remain intact. We are sinful. There's a gap there. Belief in Jesus rescues us and gives us access to God. That remains true, irrespective of what translation you're reading, what verses are in your text and not in other texts. The truth claim remain the same.
Wow. Thank you for that, Mike. I do appreciate it, and I love how you spoke about the two kind of issues. You spoke about it on a historical level, where we speak about the Bible we have thousands of manuscripts which we can trace the text we have today back to it, but you also spoke about it on an individual faith level as well, which I'm hoping by doing the two, any person listening to that can serve as a sort of encouragement for him. It definitely has for me, sat here listening to that. And thank you guys for listening. Thank you guys, Mike, as always, for sitting with me and indulging me in my questions. And as always, if you have any more questions regarding the Christian faith, do send them our way to hello@ourgodgivenmission.com. And we'll see you next week, 8 p.m. on Sunday. See you there.